Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's QC here. Today we're diving into a seriously intriguing My Hero Academia what if scenario. What if Deku was Toji Fushigiro's reincarnation? If you love AU fanfics and seeing our favorite heroes in a whole new light, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a story. Let's set a little goal. Can we get 52 likes on this video? I know this community can do it. Alright, grab your earphones and let's jump into this wild new version of Deku's journey. The accident should have ended everything. Rain fell in slow, glistening knives that evening. The kind of storm that made the hospital's automatic doors hesitate, as if sensing what was about to arrive. Nurses rushed and phones rang, but when Inko Midoriya burst inside, clutching her limp son to her chest, even the flurry paused. His skin was white as tile, his small hands smeared with blood and glass. The streetlight outside still flickered, indifferent. Inko screamed for help. They peeled Izuku from her grasp, voices crowding over one another, the way they always did in emergencies. Words like trauma, shock, puncture wound swirled and echoed. Someone started a transfusion. Another set for surgery, but it was the stillness that came next. The way the child's eyes opened, searching the overhead fluorescence, unblinking. A resident, not old enough to hide her nerves, whispered, "He's not crying." She wasn't wrong. Izuku's breath came slow, measured, even as the doctor peeled bandages from flesh that should have spilled red. Instead, blood gathered in tidy beads, refusing to flow, stubborn as mercury. "He's lost so much," said a nurse, voice trembling. "How is he?" But Izuku's green eyes flicked to her, meeting hers. There was nothing soft or childlike in them, just a calm indifference. He blinked once, and the nurse looked away, ashamed without knowing why. Down the hallway, Inko's world spun. Her knees buckled as Recovery Girl approached. The old healer's footsteps were brisk, her face sharp with focus. She pressed wrinkled fingers to Izuku's wrist and frowned. "Vitals are normal." "Too normal," she murmured, almost to herself. She tried her quirk, a warm glow, usually so quick to knit flesh and erase pain. But the energy simply faded against Izuku's skin. It was like water sliding off oiled glass. The wound resisted her, and for the first time, she felt something push back. Recovery Girl's eyes snapped to the monitors. "Bring me his chart," she barked. Now, behind the glass, doctors gathered, watching the boy on the bed. They tried to hide their unease. His chart passed from hand to hand, a list of impossibilities. Rapid healing, nerves unresponsive to pain tests, blood work that came back unreadable, like static on a screen. "His mother said he's quirkless," one muttered. The chief surgeon grunted. "No, he's something else." Outside, the rain thickened, hammering the roof like impatient fingers. Inko sat in the waiting room, fingers laced so tightly her knuckles shone white. She remembered the look in Izuku's eyes, how he watched the world, how he never cried, not even when the glass pierced his side. She remembered him waking in the night, wandering the apartment, drawn to the window and the darkness beyond. She shivered, not from cold, but from something she dared not name. Hours passed. Izuku slept, his chest rising and falling with the certainty of a tide. Nurses took shifts, none staying long. The air grew tense around his bed, thick with a discomfort that had no name. When the staff changed, whispers traveled down the hall. "He's awake, but he doesn't speak. He looks at you like he's older than he should be. Like he's seeing through you." Izuku listened, eyes half closed, adrift in a world edged in gray. He felt the questions swirl around him, the fear pressing in. He felt something else too, like a quiet river under the skin, deep and cold, threading through his bones. It hummed at the edge of every heartbeat. When he slept, dreams flickered, silver roots twisting under concrete, a sky with no sun, voices chanting in a tongue he'd never heard. He woke unafraid, but always alone. He watched his mother through the glass, her figure small and shaking. He knew she wanted to hold him, to hear him cry, to be reassured he was still a child. But something in him had shifted. The wound closed in a single, colorless seam. The pain was there, but distant, a suggestion, not a reality. A nurse tried to offer him a plush rabbit. Izuku accepted it, turning it over in his hands. The nurse flinched when their fingers touched. Static crackled. His grip was gentle, but her heart raced all the same. That night, as the hospital settled and the rain eased, A doctor scribbled a final note on his chart. Subject displays anomalous recovery. Further testing required. Recommend observation. Potential type 2 quirk or unknown variable. He didn't know what to call what he was seeing. No one did. But as the shadows stretched across the ward, Izuku's eyes caught the darkness and held it. Unflinching, alive, and utterly alien. And somewhere in that hush, the question passed between every soul who saw him. What kind of child survives the impossible and never sheds a tear? The boy who didn't bleed. The boy who wasn't afraid. The boy the night itself would not claim. The hospital lights flickered once, then stilled, as if in deference. Izuku closed his eyes and listened to the rain. Quiet, patient, waiting for something only he could feel. When Izuku returned to school, the city's morning felt sharp and unfinished, as if the sun itself hesitated behind clouds. The world was all wet pavement and the hush of children's sneakers, each step echoing in a new, deliberate way. He walked the halls with his mother's worried kiss still cold on his cheek. She'd said, "Be careful, Izuku," her hands hovering over him, never quite touching. He'd nodded, already forgetting the shape of her fear. Class 1B was a cage of noise and restless energy, desks clattering, laughter thrown like stones. The children orbited each other in the old, familiar dance. Bullies, victims, and those who watched, always pretending not to. Bakugo Katsuki ruled the center. Sharp smile, red eyes, a fuse always burning. He saw Izuku walk in and the smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat. But it was enough. Izuku met his gaze, not with challenge, but with something colder, emptier. He did not look away. Whispers hissed through the room. "Isn't that the kid who? My mom said he was in the hospital. They said he didn't even cry. That's creepy, man." Bakugo's friends nudged each other, waiting for the usual performance. This was the ritual. A few cruel words, a shove, a reminder of who was strong and who wasn't. But this time, no one moved. Bakugo stood, fist clenched at his side, searching Izuku's face for the flicker of fear he remembered. But Izuku only watched him, head tilted in faint curiosity, like a scientist or a hunter watching prey he hadn't decided to eat. Bakugo's skin prickled. "Oi, Deku," Bakugo said, the nickname as familiar as a curse. "What? You too scared to stay home now? Or did they fix your stupid head?" Silence. Izuku's lips barely moved. "I feel fine." He meant it. Bakugo's jaw tightened. Something about the way Izuku looked at him, eyes the color of moss, dark and still, made his stomach twist. He remembered, suddenly, the story his mother had told, about animals that froze when they saw a predator, knowing they were already dead. A pencil snapped in Bakugo's hand. Across the room, someone flinched. The teacher arrived, blustering apologies for his lateness, but the temperature in the class never quite warmed. The lesson passed in blurs and fragments. Izuku stared out the window, tracing rainwater as it chased itself down the glass. At recess, the old routine tried to reassert itself. 3 boys cornered Izuku by the chain-link fence, bigger than him, louder, faces twisted in false bravado. "You think you're better than us, freak? No quirk, no friends. And you think you're hot stuff just cause you didn't die?" Izuku watched them, his breathing slow. He was not angry. He was not scared. He simply waited. The tallest boy lunged, reaching to shove him. Izuku sidestepped, a movement so simple it seemed accidental. The boy's hand slid past, colliding with metal. Izuku's gaze followed, measuring, impassive. The next attack came faster, a fist swung wide. Izuku caught the wrist, fingers gentle but unyielding. For an instant, the world narrowed to the point of contact, a jolt of something cold passing from his skin to theirs. The boy jerked back, eyes wide. "What the hell?" Izuku did not answer. The third boy, already paling, stumbled over his own feet and fled. The others followed, silence trailing them like a curse. Izuku stood alone, breathing in the cold iron tang of the fence, the memory of violence curling in the air. Across the playground, Bakugo watched, arms folded, face storm-dark. He'd seen it all. There was no glory, no shouting, no rage. Just inevitability, the way a shadow slips under a locked door. When Izuku walked back inside, the hall parted for him. Whispers bloomed behind him, half fear, half wonder. He didn't hear them. He heard the sound of his own heart, a quiet, relentless rhythm. Under his skin, the river of energy throbbed, patient and indifferent. The world was full of noise, but inside Izuku, there was only silence. At his desk, Izuku stared at his own hands. Small, pale, almost ordinary. But when he flexed his fingers, he felt the crackle of something ancient move beneath the surface. Something neither quirk nor curse, but a presence waiting to be named. At the far window, rain clouds began to break, slicing shafts of cold sunlight into the room. In that uncertain light, Izuku's shadow stretched longer than it should, spilling into corners where no child's shadow belonged. Somewhere, Bakuga scowled and scribbled in his notebook, jaw tight, haunted by the memory of those eyes. He would not forget the feeling, the certainty that, in that brief moment, he had been seen not as a rival, but as prey. And in the hush that followed, a rumor began to take root. A story of the boy who did not bleed, and the first predator who turned away. Night fell sharp and absolute over Mizutofu. The city's glow pressed against the sky, but the streets between Izuku's apartment and the edge of downtown melted into a deeper kind of dark. A velvet hush broken only by distant sirens, the murmur of late trains, the scuff of shoes against pavement. Izuku preferred the world like this, emptied of voices, full of space and shadow. At home, his mother slept fitfully, worry hardwired into every breath. He watched her sometimes, unsure whether it was pity or longing that kept him rooted in the doorway. Tonight, as the clock brushed past midnight, he slipped outside, bare feet silent on the balcony tile. The air was damp, heavy with coming rain. Izuku vaulted the railing, landing on the building's emergency ladder with impossible grace. 3 stories up, the city's noise faded into a low, expectant hum. He moved up and over, muscles remembering the motion before his mind could question it. It was instinct, an old, secret rhythm he'd never been taught. The rooftop was cold and slick. Izuku knelt at its edge, eyes sweeping the street. The world below was threaded with possibility, veins of motion and intent. He could sense it, the churn of traffic, the heartbeat of distant lives, the restless hunger of the city. But what he felt most was the dark. He breathed in, letting it fill him, not fear, but a fierce, lucid calm. His mind slipped sideways, awareness expanding. On the next rooftop, a cat balanced on a ledge, pawing at a plastic bag. The animal slipped, tumbling toward open air. Izuku moved before he thought. 1 step, 2, feet barely whispering against concrete. He leapt across the chasm between buildings, body bending in a way that defied gravity, hands reaching and finding fur and muscle in the dark. He landed, knees flexing, cap pressed to his chest. The animal hissed, eyes wild, then stilled as Izuku held it, heartbeat matching his own. He set it down gently. It vanished into the night without looking back. Izuku stood, feeling the night lean in around him. He remembered being told, stay away from the dark. Stay inside where it's safe. But out here, he felt nothing but clarity, a quiet detachment, as if danger could not touch him. Even his own pain was a memory, muted and distant. When he looked down at his hands, they were steady, unmarred. But under the skin, he felt it, the river of cold, bright power, the current that set him apart from everyone, even those with quirks. He remembered the word that flickered at the edge of overheard adult conversations, heavenly restriction. He did not know what it meant, only that it was a name for the weight he carried, the thing that watched with him from every shadow. A sudden sound, shouts, quick and sharp, echoing from an alley below. Izuku's head snapped up, senses sharpening, eyes narrowing to slits. He listened. 3 voices, rough and predatory. The scrape of a knife. The high, stuttering breath of fear. Without hesitation, Izuku slipped down the fire escape, every movement silent, precise. He found them in the alley. 2 men cornering a third, taller and shaking, hands up in useless protest. The blade flashed, a pale curve in the gloom. Izuku stepped forward. The motion was fluid, effortless, a ghost taking shape. The knife slashed toward him. Izuku bent, twisting aside, letting the weapon whistle past. His hand found the attacker's wrist, pressure blooming with surgical precision. The blade clattered to the ground. He stepped into the second man's path, eyes locked. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed. Just Izuku, the man, and a terror that rooted itself deep and primal. Run, Izuku said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. The victim didn't need to be told twice. He bolted, stumbling toward the safety of the streetlights. The attackers hesitated, faces slack with something that was not quite fear, but closer to recognition. a sense that this child was not a child, that something ancient stared out through those green eyes. Izuku let them go. They fled, leaving the knife where it fell. He stood alone in the alley, heart slow and steady, as the darkness coiled around him, welcoming, familiar. For a long moment, he stared up at the sky, clouds roiling, moon-veiled. The world was vast and indifferent, but for the first time, Izuku felt it. He was not a part of this world, but something set apart, a watcher, a force moving beneath the surface. He felt the power swirl in his chest, cold and limitless, asking nothing in return but his silence. Back on the rooftop, he watched the horizon bleed blue with coming dawn, shadows stretching and shivering. Somewhere below, a stray cat mewed, a tiny, defiant sound in the quiet. Izuku closed his eyes, breathing in the dark, and let himself belong to it. When he returned home, slipping into bed before sunrise, Inko woke to find him curled beneath the covers, face peaceful, as if he'd never left. She brushed his hair from his forehead, hands trembling with a love too fierce to speak. In the half-light, she wondered, not for the first time, what kind of child dreams so quietly and wakes without fear. The city's bones groaned under the weight of twilight, steel and glass sighing as day slipped into shadow. Streetlights flickered on, scattering moths and washing the alleyways with tired gold. Izuku Midoriya preferred this hour, when the world's edges blurred and the streets emptied of witnesses. He moved through the back streets with hands in his pockets, green hood drawn low. The rhythm of his footsteps was a silent metronome, measured, unhurried, almost too quiet for the rain-slicked pavement. He saw everything. More than that, he felt it, every surge of intent, every echo of violence, a tension in the air that prickled his skin. The rumors had grown bold lately. Whispers of a ghost in the alleys, a shadow kid, who made thugs vanish or fall in the night. Izuku didn't care for stories. He cared only for the pull, the compulsion that drew him wherever the city's hunger gathered. Tonight, the alley behind the shuttered ramen shop was thick with that hunger. For men circled a fifth, their voices low, their movements jittery with desperation. One had a length of pipe, another, a glint of steel. The fifth, a delivery boy, backpack slung tight across trembling shoulders, tried to shrink smaller. "Give it here, and you walk away," said the man with the pipe. Izuku leaned against the mouth of the alley, unseen, listening to the dull ache in his veins. The cursed energy hummed, an electric thread tugging him forward. For a moment, he studied the scene, the trembling hands, the bristling tension, the inevitability of cruelty. A bottle shattered. The delivery boy yelped, stumbling against the wall. Izuku moved. He entered the alley in a single, seamless stride, the kind that didn't belong to a child. Almost inhuman, smooth as shadow. The nearest thug spun, pipe raised, but Izuku was already inside his guard, hand clamping the wrist, twisting. The pipe hit the ground with a ringing clatter. The man with the knife lunged. Izuku caught the blade, not at the hilt, but at the edge, skin closing around cold steel. The attacker's eyes widened as Izuku's hand bled, then stopped. The blood beaded, defiant, refusing to drip. Izuku squeezed, and the knife snapped in his palm with a dry, final sound. Someone cursed, fear spiking sharp in the air. Izuku looked up, meeting the eyes of each attacker in turn. His gaze was cold, pitiless, a green too deep for childhood. "Leave," he said. The word was soft, but it rang in the mind like a warning bell. They ran, scrambling over themselves to escape the boy and the hush he left behind. The delivery boy stared, wide-eyed and shivering. "Go home," Izuku told him. He didn't ask twice. The boy fled, vanishing into the city's veins, never looking back. Izuku crouched, flexing his hand. The cut was already closing, the pain a distant echo. He watched the wound, curious, detached. Under his skin, the cursed energy coiled, cold and precise, mending what no doctor could reach. Above, neon signs sputtered and fizzed. Far off, sirens wailed, slow and too late. Izuku's shadow stretched behind him, warped by the alley's light, longer and sharper than it should be. He stood and brushed glass from his sleeve. There was no triumph in his movements, no satisfaction, only a methodical efficiency. He remembered the old men on the block whispering about monsters in the night. He wondered what they would call him, if they knew. Up on the rooftops, he leapt from ledge to ledge, barely disturbing the puddles that shimmered in the dark. A security camera tracked the motion, just a blur, a distortion, nothing more. In the control room 2 blocks away, a guard paused, frowning at the glitch. Huh, weird. The tape would show nothing but a brief flicker, a shape where nothing should be. Back home, Inko checked the locks twice. She watched the clock, wondering if she would hear her son's voice tonight, or only the silence that followed him everywhere. The next morning, a police officer scribbled in a battered notebook, glancing at the alley behind the ramen shop. No sign of the perps. Witness claims he was rescued by a ghost. He snorted, snapping the book closed. Kids and their stories. But on a dozen street corners, in whispers passed from mouth to mouth, a legend grew. They called him the alley ghost, the boy with eyes like emerald ice, the one who moved like night and left no mark but fear. And somewhere, perched on the edge of a rooftop, Izuku watched the sun crawl up through the haze. He blinked against the light, unmoved. The world would call him what it liked. He belonged to the dark, and as long as it needed him, he would answer. The exam arena's floodlights sliced through early morning haze, casting steel shadows across fields of battered metal and concrete. Even at dawn, UA High School felt electric, bristling with nerves, hopes, and the crackle of 1,000 quirks sparking to life. Izuku stood among them, silent in a crowd that buzzed with excitement and bravado, every breath measured, every muscle loose and ready. Students clustered in nervous cliques, trading boasts or anxious smiles. Bakugo barked at a hapless hopeful. Others shrank from the famous name, none noticing the quiet boy with haunted eyes. Izuku watched them all, reading the tension, the pecking order, the scent of fear beneath deodorant and ambition. When Present Mic's voice boomed over the loudspeakers, "Start." Chaos erupted. Test takers surged forward in a riot of quirks, explosions, vines, laser beams, swarms of mechanical arms. Izuku walked. His first robot came for him, a hulking, three-eyed sentinel, metal fists cocked and whirring. Izuku sidestepped the blow, fingers grazing the cold armor. He pivoted, eyes narrowing. He felt the thing's intention, its mechanical bloodlust. He listened for the seams. 1, 2, 3 movements, too fast for the cameras. He wrenched a panel loose, yanked out a fistful of wiring, and, with a flick of his wrist, jammed the sparking core into the robot's own joint. The machine convulsed, then collapsed in a heap. Izuku's hands came away scorched but unshaken. He barely glanced at the wreckage before moving on. By the 3rd minute, the field began to shift around him. The other examinees, spurred by adrenaline and panic, scattered from his path. He left a trail of ruined machines, torn apart with surgical efficiency, their own pieces repurposed as spears, shields, and traps. He never hesitated, never wasted a step. No one saw a quirk flash, just a blur of movement, a cold calculation behind every action. A boy with blades for arms staggered back as Izuku slid past, tossing a robot's decapitated head into another's chassis with a precision that made onlookers gasp. From the observation booth above, teachers leaned in, eyes narrowing. "He's not using any known quirk," murmured Snipe. Aizawa said nothing, but his eyes tracked every motion, cataloging, searching for a weakness. Beside him, Recovery Girl frowned. "He doesn't even look winded. And those wounds. Look, he's bleeding. But they're already closing." Nizu sipped his tea, ears twitching. Very interesting. Very concerning. In the field, the zero-pointer barreled in, casting a long, city-eating shadow. Screams rose. Most students fled. Izuku looked up, calculating. He saw a girl pinned beneath rubble, her hands scrabbling, panic wild in her eyes. He moved, not running, but with a velocity that blurred his outline. Debris exploded under his feet, and suddenly he was beside her, stone shattering in his grip as if it were foam. He lifted her with care, his touch gentle, almost apologetic. The girl gawked, speechless, as he set her on her feet and pointed. "Go." She ran, not daring to look back. The zero-pointer swung. Izuku didn't flinch. He leapt, feet finding impossible purchase on the machine's armor, scaling it in a heartbeat. At the summit, he tore free a length of rebar and drove it with brutal simplicity into the robot's main camera. The giant's limbs jerked, spasmed, and the head crashed to the ground, sending a tremor through the arena. Izuku landed in its shadow, unhurried, blood seeping from a split knuckle. He flexed his hand, watching the skin knit itself closed, slow, incomplete, but undeniably unnatural. From above, Recovery Girl's lips thinned. My healing didn't work on him. It just slipped off. Nizu's voice was soft, but the edge was unmistakable. What are you, Midoriya-kun? The exam ended with a shriek of feedback and the echo of sirens. Later, as medics swept the field, Izuku sat on the edge of the arena, alone. A paramedic approached, offering a bandage, but paused at the last second, caught in the gravity of Izuku's gaze. The boy's eyes were unfathomable. No gratitude, no fatigue, just the endless silence of deep water. He wrapped his own hand, methodical, as students watched from a safe distance. But Kugu stared, jaw clenched, hands flexing with anger and something he would never call fear. The day waned, and the teachers gathered in the conference room, lights humming overhead. Aizawa's voice was grave. He's not a villain, but he's not like the others, either. All Might watched the replay in silence. Izuku's smirk reflected in the screen, a mirror held up to everything the symbol of peace was supposed to understand. Nizu clicked his pen, making a note in crimson ink. UA's greatest anomaly. UA's unsolvable problem. Night fell across the empty campus. Izuku walked home alone, city lights flickering at the edge of vision. Under his skin, the old, forbidden energy hummed, a shadow's lullaby, waiting to be unleashed. He slipped into the dark, unseen and unafraid. The world's questions chasing after him like hounds at the edge of a vast, unknown forest. Rain lingered in the morning air, beating on UA's spotless glass as if the school itself were sweating beneath the weight of its own legend. Students filled the halls with nervous laughter, fresh uniforms rustling, new shoes squeaking against linoleum. But Izuku Midoriya was called somewhere else. A text, terse and unsigned, had come at dawn. Report to Office 3C. Confidential. The corridors were a labyrinth of polished metal and distant voices. Izuku moved through them without hurry, hands folded neatly, eyes downcast but aware of every ripple in the atmosphere, every stare, every whispered speculation in his wake. He heard his name. He heard the words, "That's the one. The strange one. The problem." He reached the door, frosted glass, brass handle cold against his palm. Inside, the air was still. Nizu sat behind the desk, small, pristine, a cup of tea steaming at his elbow. Next to him stood All Might in civilian clothes, every inch too large for the chair he'd tried to occupy. His eyes were shadowed, his smile only a memory. Aizawa slouched in the corner, arms crossed, gaze unreadable. Izuku stepped in. He closed the door behind him with careful precision. Nizu gestured to the chair opposite, but Izuku remained standing. The pause stretched. "Midoriya, Izuku," Nizu began, voice gentle. "Do you know why we've asked you here?" Izuku tilted his head. The light caught the green of his eyes, sharpening them to cold fire. "Because you don't understand me," he answered, voice quiet, almost amused. "Because you're afraid." All Might's hands balled into fists on his knees. "Young Midoriya, we..." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "We only want to help." Izuku regarded him for a long moment, weighing the honesty in his tone. "Help who?" he asked. "Me? Or the school?" Aizawa's eyes narrowed. "Cut the games. We've seen your records. We've seen what you did in the exam. You're not using a quirk we can classify. Recovery Girl's ability can't heal you. Your biology." He paused, as if uncertain whether he should even call it that. "You're not normal." Izuku's lips twitched into something not quite a smile. "No one here is normal, sensei." Nizu's whiskers trembled, but his gaze was razor sharp. "We are responsible for every student's safety. If you are something more or something other, we need to know." A hush, heavy and waiting. Izuku looked at his hands, flexing them as if testing invisible wires beneath the skin. He answered, softly, "You want to know what I am? I don't have a word for it. My mother doesn't. The doctors tried. You'll try too. But I'm not here to be solved." He lifted his eyes, and the weight of him seemed to expand, filling the office with a presence colder than the rain outside. "I'm just here to be a hero," he said. "The rest is noise." All Might leaned forward, struggling to find his old certainty. "If you're hiding something, if you're in pain, we can help. You don't have to do this alone." Izuku held his gaze. For a moment, the years seemed to peel away, and Toshinori Yagi saw only the haunted certainty of a child who had survived too much. "I've never been alone," Izuku murmured. "Not really." Nizu studied him, fingers tapping a soundless rhythm. You're an anomaly, Midoriya-kun. But you've also saved lives, already, and at your own expense. We can't ignore your power, but we cannot ignore the danger either. You are admitted to UA, but you will be watched. Understood. Izuku's smirk returned, thin, a dare, a promise. Watch all you want. The room exhaled, tension unspooling just a fraction. Aizawa stepped forward, voice low. You step out of line, and I'll erase you myself. Izuku met his gaze, unflinching. You can try. The threat hung between them, electric, then faded. All Might, weary, nodded. Welcome to UA, young man. Izuku nodded once, sharp and silent, and turned for the door. Behind him, Nizu exchanged glances with the teachers. We haven't had a problem we couldn't solve before, he said, almost to himself. Aizawa watched Izuku's retreating back, unease prickling his skin. Maybe that's about to change. In the corridor, the air was brighter, full of student voices. But every step Izuku took seemed to carve a space around him, a hush where speculation grew. He walked through it all, a rumor given flesh, a shadow stitched to the seams of the world, neither villain nor savior, but something no one could yet define. He smiled to himself, just once. I'm here to be a hero. The rest is noise. The doors to Class 1A slid open with the faintest shudder, as if the school itself hesitated to let Izuku Midoriya pass. The first morning of UA should have felt like a beginning. Fresh uniforms, the hush of polished floors, an undercurrent of nervous laughter. But the air changed when he entered. A stillness rippled through the room. Conversations faltered, hands paused mid-gesture, and every pair of eyes, some curious, some wary, found him. Izuku crossed the threshold, gazed down, shoulders relaxed, his footsteps soft but precise. It wasn't arrogance, nor was it shyness. It was the gravity of someone who had never belonged and never expected to. Bakuga's chair scraped, a sharp warning. Katsuki had always thrived on attention, dominating every space with volume and heat. Today, though, he looked up, hesitating for the briefest instant as Izuku's shadow slid across his desk. Their eyes met, and Bakuga's usual fire guttered, replaced by something raw and uncertain. A beat of silence. Bakuga's voice, pitched low, bristled with challenge he didn't quite feel. TCH, don't think this means anything, Deku. Izuku just looked at him, calm and inscrutable, then nodded as if to say, noted. Irrelevant. He took his seat by the window, third row, second from the back, and the space around him remained untouched, a pocket of quiet in a sea of nervous energy. Ochako Uraraka watched from 2 seats away, lips pursed in concern. She wanted to say hello, to offer friendship, but something in the way he held himself, a careful, practiced detachment, made her hesitate. He looks lonely, she thought, but the word felt wrong. Not lonely. Untouchable. Ida straightened his glasses, voice clipped. Let's all introduce ourselves and get along. Midoriya, was it? I hope we'll. Izuku's eyes flickered to his, an unspoken warning. Don't come closer than you should. Ida swallowed, nodding a little too quickly, as if he'd touched a live wire. Aizawa arrived, sliding out of his yellow sleeping bag in the corner. His gaze swept the room, but lingered on Izuku. They exchanged a long, wordless glance. The teacher's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in years, Shota Aizawa felt the delicate itch of self-preservation. This kid could kill me, if he wanted. The thought was unbidden, irrational, and impossible to ignore. Aizawa cleared his throat. Get your uniforms from the back. Then, outside, apprehension test. Now, the class rose in a rush, relief breaking the tension. But as they funneled past Izuku, each student gave him a fraction more space than the last. In the locker room, the silence returned. Kaminari tried a joke, something about freaking out the robots, but the words died as soon as Izuku entered. Mineta, already nervous, shifted behind Kirishima, as if expecting an outburst that never came. Izuku changed quickly, methodically. He stared at his own reflection in the polished steel of the locker. Green eyes, pale skin, a face too still for 16. He let his breath fog the metal, tracing a circle with his thumb. For a moment, he remembered the hospital room, the way everyone's voices softened when they thought he couldn't hear. He shut the locker, the clang echoing louder than it should. On the field, Aizawa waited. Sunlight glared off the track, the heat of late morning already rippling through the air. Bakuga, what was your best throw in middle school? Aizawa asked. Bakuga snorted, already bristling. 67 meters. Aizawa tossed him the ball. Try it with your quirk. Bakugo wound up, explosions flaring from his palms. Boom, and the ball soared, shattering the record. The class cheered, tension breaking for a moment as everyone jostled for position. Then Izuku stepped forward, silent, eyes fixed on the horizon. He took the ball in both hands, rolling it across his knuckles. The cursed energy simmered, unseen but undeniable, a low, cold hum beneath his skin. He threw. The ball vanished in an instant, punching through the sky, gone before the echo reached the field. The machine beeped, hesitated, then flickered with an error code. Out of range. For a moment, no one spoke. Aizawa lowered his capture weapon, voice careful. You didn't use a quirk, Midoriya? Izuku shrugged. Not in any way you'd understand. Bakugo stared, knuckles bone white, and the rest of the class looked at Izuku with a new, uneasy awe. The test continued. Izuku ran, leapt, and dodged, not just better, but differently, as if the world's rules bent around him. The track bent in his shadow. The sand pit quivered where he landed. Each record he broke, the class stepped further back. Uraraka found herself staring at his hands, wondering how something so quiet could hold so much force. Todoroki narrowed his eyes, measuring him not as a rival, but as an unknown element. When the final scores came in, Izuku stood at the top, untouched, alone. At lunch, the whispers began again. Is he even human? Bakugo looked scared of him. He didn't smile once. Izuku ate in silence, back to the wall, listening to the rhythm of forks and gossip, the heartbeat of a world that would never let him in. He was used to it. He welcomed it. Outside, clouds rolled across the sky, shadows moving over the campus, sharp and silent. Inside, Izuku's presence weighed on every conversation, every glance, every heartbeat. Day one, the beginning of everything, or the end of something else. And in the hush that followed, the class knew. A storm had entered their midst, quiet and inevitable, and nothing would ever be the same. Sunlight knifed through the early haze as Class 1A filed onto the training field, the grass still slick from last night's rain. The morning buzzed with anticipation and something sharper, an undercurrent of unease. They lined up, side by side, shoes sinking slightly into the sodden earth. Every student felt it, though no one spoke. The unspoken tension that grew thicker each time Midoriya Izuku stood among them. Aizawa surveyed them with his usual sleepy-eyed glare. Apprehension test. Standard track events. No tricks, no shortcuts. Show me what you are, not just what you can do. His scarf flicked with each word. This isn't about quirks. It's about potential. Kaminari flexed his fingers, sparks popping between his knuckles. Shiro bounced on his heels, muttering a joke to Kirishima. Bakugo glared straight ahead, jaw set so hard it ached. Izuku waited at the end of the line, hands loose at his sides, the very picture of patience. If he was nervous, it didn't show. He watched, not the test itself, but each of his classmates, measuring, cataloging, understanding the shape of every strength and every fear. First, the sprint. Ida's engines revved, launching him down the lane in a blue-white blur. Impressive, until Izuku took his mark. Aizawa raised the starter pistol. Go! Izuku moved, not with the explosive speed of a quirk, but with an efficiency so pure it defied physics. Each stride was perfectly measured, gravity itself seeming to loosen its grip. He crossed the finish line before most could even process the movement. The timer buzzed, stuttering, error. The silence in the stands was palpable. Ochako pressed a hand to her chest, uncertain whether she was awed or frightened. Kaminari gaped. Did he teleport? Todoroki frowned, calculating. No frost, no fire, no sign of a quirk at all. Next, the grip test. Sato's hands crushed the device, numbers ticking upward. Bakugo, teeth gritted, forced the gauge to shudder. Izuku wrapped his fingers around the handle. For a heartbeat, he stilled, energy pooling, condensing in his palm. When he squeezed, the machine cracked, display blinking out as if struck by lightning. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, lips thinning. We'll need a new one, he murmured. Izuku offered it back, apologetic. Sorry. The ball throw. Bakugo's explosion launched his shot far past the line, smoke trailing behind. Students hooped, but the noise faded as Izuku stepped up. He didn't wind up. He simply flicked his wrist, and the ball vanished, lost to the horizon. The reading came back. Infinity. Aizawa didn't even flinch this time. They moved through long jump, endurance, sidesteps. Each test a showcase of quirks, personalities, limits. But Izuku outpaced, outmuscled, outmaneuvered every record, each movement chillingly precise. Where others sweated and strained, he simply was, not superhuman, but otherworldly, moving as if the rules of flesh and time bent to his will. Kirishima punched his shoulder afterward, grinning in awe. "You're crazy strong, dude. What's your secret?" Izuku shrugged, eyes far away. "No secret. Just focus." Bakuga stalked past, teeth bared, voice raw. "What are you even trying to prove, Deku?" Izuku looked at him, gaze soft but unyielding. "I'm not proving anything." His words were calm, but Bakugo recoiled as if struck. At the end, Aizawa tallied the results, face unreadable. Top marks, Midoriya. He scanned the list, eyes flicking between names. Lowest score, Mineta. But today, no one's getting expelled. A collective exhale rippled through the class, relief colliding with the unsolved tension Izuku left in his wake. As they left the field, Todoroki paused beside Izuku, offering a silent, searching look. There was no rivalry, just curiosity, sharpened by a sliver of unease. "You don't fight like anyone I've seen," he said, voice low. "You move differently." Izuku nodded, faintly amused. "Maybe I am different." The answer lingered between them, heavy as thunder. That night, in the dorm common room, whispers grew louder. "He broke every record. Aizawa couldn't erase anything. He doesn't even act like he cares." In the quiet that followed, Izuku sat by the window, watching his reflection dissolve into the glass, the city lights distant and flickering. His hands, folded in his lap, looked delicate, almost ordinary. But every student in 1A knew there was nothing ordinary about the presence that haunted their class. Above UA, the sky rumbled, storm clouds gathering. And in the hush before sleep, the question pressed in on every mind. What do you do with a storm you can't control? Evening spilled gold and blue across the campus, burning the edges of the city in light. The test scores were posted, and students in Class 1A drifted out of the locker rooms in knots. Some triumphant, some subdued, all changed. For the first time, the myth of UA's best and brightest felt uncertain, overshadowed by a quiet boy whose presence redrew every line. Izuku Midoriya sat on the gym steps, alone. The sun caught in his hair, his face turned toward the orange dusk. He listened to the fading thump of shoes, the distant laughter of classmates. Each sound faded, leaving only his own breath and the low, familiar hum of cursed energy winding beneath his ribs, a cold pulse that no warmth could touch. He didn't mind the solitude. He preferred it. Footsteps approached, measured and heavy. A shadow fell across his own, a silhouette carved by the setting sun. All Might, the former symbol of peace, dressed in teacher's clothes that fit poorly on his skeletal frame, stood silent for a moment. The weight of his name always filled a room. Here, it merely filled the space between them. "Izuku, my boy." The words were gentle, seeking purchase in the quiet. "You did well today." "Remarkably well." Izuku nodded, still watching the sun slip lower. "Thank you, All Might." All Might hesitated. "You know, I see a lot of myself in you." His voice strained for optimism, but Izuku didn't look up. "I'm not you," he said quietly. "Not rude, not proud, simply true." A pause. A crow called in the distance, as if to fill the silence. All Might sat beside him, wincing a little. "I want you to understand something. Being a hero isn't just about power or even saving others. It's about heart. It's about letting people in, letting them see you, even the parts that hurt." Izuku's lips twitched, almost a smile. "That's what scares them. That's what scares you." All Might turned, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. Izuku's gaze was distant, voice as calm as rain on glass. "You wanted a successor, someone to wear the cape, hold the torch. But I don't want to be you, All Might. I want to be what you never dared." He looked at his hands, flexing his fingers, studying the fine, unbroken lines where wounds had closed without a scar. "If people knew what I was, they wouldn't see a hero. They'd see a threat." All Might let the words settle, shoulders sagging under the invisible weight of legacy. "But you are a hero, Midoriya, whether you know it or not." Izuku shook his head, just once. "Maybe, maybe not." He watched the last edge of sunlight vanish behind the city. "It doesn't matter what they call me. I'll do what needs doing. The rest is just noise." A gentle wind swept over the field, ruffling their hair, carrying the distant sound of city life. The world continuing indifferent. All Might looked at Izuku, searching for the lost, hopeful boy he'd seen years ago. But Izuku was unreadable now. A cipher, calm and strange, his resolve quietly terrifying. At last, All Might stood, straightening his tie with hands that shook. "You're not alone, my boy, even if it feels that way." Izuku said nothing. The hero walked away, his shadow growing long and thin as the evening deepened. Izuku watched him go, the darkness gathering at his feet, patient and absolute. In the dorms, laughter and music drifted from behind closed doors, but none spilled into Izuku's room. His bed was neatly made, his notebooks stacked with precise care. He sat at his desk, window open to the night air, and listened to the city's heartbeat. He did not write. He did not dream. Above UA, clouds drifted, moonlight splitting on glass and water. And in the hush that pressed close around him, Izuku Midoriya let the silence grow. Not a symbol, not a legacy, something else. Waiting in the dark that UA's dorms at night were supposed to be safe. Windows glowing warm, laughter pooling in corridors, the distant murmur of games and late-night snacks. Yet wherever Izuku Midoriya walked, a hush went with him. Not fear, exactly, but reverence with an edge. Tonight, the common room throbbed with life. Kaminari and Kirishima argued over a video game. Uraraka's laughter drifted like bells. But when Izuku entered, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations shrank, energy curling inward, students suddenly aware of their own voices. He moved quietly, crossing the carpet with a kind of self-erasure, as if he were a visitor passing through someone else's dream. Every motion precise, nothing wasted. When he fetched a cup of water, no one offered him a snack. No one dared prank him, not after the stories, of the test, of the day's impossible records, of the way Bakugo stared at him with something that wasn't hatred anymore, but unease. From the corner couch, Uraraka watched. She tried to meet his eyes, but Izuku's gaze swept past her, never unfriendly, but distant, as if seeing through layers of shadow no one else could sense. She wondered, for the 100th time, what it would be like to touch his hand, to say his name, to be noticed. But instinct held her back. Bakugo sat by the window, jaw set, arms folded, tracking Izuku with the wariness of an animal who's glimpsed the night's true teeth. Todoroki said nothing at all, watching the lines of tension ripple through the room like cracks in winter ice. Aizawa passed in the hallway, eyes landing on Izuku just long enough for understanding to pass between them. A recognition of power and risk, unsaid and undeniable. Later, in the blue hush of the dorm corridor, Mina and Siro traded whispers. "He's always so calm." "Yeah, but it's not normal. He doesn't laugh, doesn't get mad. Even Bakugo's different around him." "Would you prank him?" Siro asked, grinning nervously. Mina shook her head. "No way. Something about him. It's like he's not even here half the time." Izuku's own room was sparse. The bed, neat and untouched. The desk, arrayed with notebooks and pens, meticulously aligned. On the windowsill, a single potted plant leaned toward the moon. He stood by the window, tracing the patterns of the city's lights, each one a heartbeat, each one oblivious to the presence watching from above. He opened the pane. The air was sharp, clean. He let the silence settle around his shoulders like a mantle. From somewhere deep inside, the cursed energy murmured, cold and inexhaustible. He let it fill him, quiet and complete, until even his pulse seemed to vanish. He closed his eyes. In the world outside, a siren wailed. Footsteps ran in the distance. Shadows lengthened and bent toward the places where light failed. Izuku opened his eyes to the night, watching the city breathe beneath him. He felt no loneliness, only a sense of inevitability, as if his presence were part of something older than even the school, older than the city itself. A living rumor. A question the world had only begun to ask. Elsewhere, as midnight drew close, Uraraka stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, and wondered if anyone would ever really know him. Bakugo stared at his ceiling, fists clenched. The image of Izuku's unblinking gaze burned into his thoughts. And Aizawa, half asleep on the teacher's floor, wrote a note to himself. Monitor Midoriya. Not for discipline, for survival. Above UA, the moon hung full and white, casting long shadows through the school's empty halls. And at his window, neither in nor out, Izuku Midoriya watched the world. Quiet, unreachable, a presence rising, patient as dawn, shadow woven through every breath. The dorms, for all their safety, held a secret that none could name, a storm that had not yet broken, and a boy at its silent, waiting heart. The training arena gleamed under harsh white lights, the vast space cold as a hangar, echoing every nervous footstep. UA's first real trial was legend among first years. Teams pitted against each other, hero versus villain, all eyes watching. For Class 1A, the tension was a living thing, buzzing beneath uniforms and bravado. Aizawa stood at the head of the group, arms crossed, voice flat as stone. Heroes, Midoriya and Uraraka. Villains, Bakugo and Ida. He paused just long enough to let the implications settle, his eyes never leaving Izuku. You have 10 minutes. The hero team must capture the bomb. Begin. Uraraka's hands shook a little, but she smiled at Izuku as their helmets snapped on. Let's do our best, Deku. He nodded, gaze fixed on the far end of the map where the bomb, and Bakugo waited. Stay close, but don't draw attention. Let them come to me. Uraraka blinked, surprised by the softness of his voice, the calm certainty that chased away her nerves. Okay, I'll trust you. The steel doors hissed open. They moved into the labyrinth, Uraraka floating at the edge of Izuku's shadow. Every corridor pulsed with threat, every turn a trap waiting to spring. Bakugo was first. He didn't hesitate. The explosion came without warning, the roar swallowing metal and air. Deku, Bakugo shouted, voice wild. Come on, show me. Izuku stepped into the blast, not dodging, but absorbing. The fire curled around him, clothes blackened at the edges, but he kept moving, eyes locked on Bakugo's face, unmoved by heat or fury. Bakugo's bravado flickered, replaced by something raw. He unleashed another barrage, sweat flying, veins bulging. Why won't you fight? Izuku tilted his head. I am. He moved then, no wasted effort, no telegraph, just a blur. His hand closed on Bakugo's wrist, and for the briefest second, their eyes met. Bakugo saw himself reflected back, every fear, every ambition, every helpless rage. Izuku's grip was gentle, but unbreakable. You're strong, Kaken, but not strong enough. The words were soft, almost sad. With a twist, Izuku disarmed Bakugo, sending him skidding down the hall in a shower of sparks. In the same motion, Izuku intercepted Ida, who tried to flank him. Moving so fast Uraraka almost missed it. He tapped Ida's armor, sending him sprawling with a calculated sweep. The sensors on their suits blinked, immobilized. Uraraka gasped. Deku, that was. Izuku shook his head, already moving. There's the bomb. Finish it. Uraraka floated to the pedestal, touching it lightly. Hero team wins. Present Mick's voice boomed through the arena, stunned and half delighted. Up in the control booth, the teachers watched in silence. Aizawa broke it first, voice wary. He dismantled them in under a minute. No wasted movement. No ego. He could have done worse. He chose not to. All Might, for once, had nothing to say. Nizu's eyes shone. He's rewriting our expectations with every breath. Down on the field, Bakugo stared at the ceiling, chest heaving, pride in ruins. He could not look at Izuku, could not bear the memory of those calm, alien eyes. Ida, ever honorable, struggled to his feet, bowing to Izuku. Thank you for the lesson, Midoriya. Izuku simply nodded, already retreating into himself. The others watched him go, awe and fear mingling, whispers gathering like thunderclouds. In the locker room, Uraraka wrapped her arms around herself, shivering with the memory of what she'd just witnessed. Is he really a first year? She wondered aloud. Bakugo stared at his hands, the tremor in his fingers betraying him. No, he thought. He's not. He's something else. And above them, invisible in the rafters, the school's cameras flickered, their recordings struggling to keep up with the storm in their midst. From that day forward, no one doubted the hierarchy in Class 1A. Izuku didn't need to declare it. He simply was, the apex to which all others would measure themselves, and the presence none could challenge. Rain drummed on UA's windows, silvering the glass as night dragged its slow, heavy shadows across campus. In a quiet surveillance room 3 floors above the dorms, Nizu sat at the center of a ring of screens, every monitor cycling through footage of Class 1 as battle trial. His small, precise paws rested on the table, teacup cooling untouched beside him. Aizawa leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, hair loose and damp. Neither spoke as they watched the feeds, Bakugo's rage dissolving into fear, Ida's pride upended, Uraraka's wonder and confusion, and Izuku, always at the eye of the storm, moving through the chaos with a calm that was never shaken. On one screen, Izuku's face paused mid-turn. The green eyes glinted cold, reflecting not excitement, but a bottomless calm, unreadable and unafraid. Aizawa broke the silence first, voice low. We don't have a file for what he did. No quirk registered. No visible enhancement. He was holding back, and they all knew it. Nizu's ears twitched, eyes never leaving the monitor. Not holding back. Choosing restraint. His claws tapped a rhythm against the desk. Every move is measured. Even when provoked, he's surgical. No showmanship. No indulgence. He's not seeking victory. He's eliminating obstacles. Aizawa's frown deepened. He didn't injure anyone. Not really. But Bakugo looked at him the way prey looks at a predator. So did Ida. He glanced at Nizu. Is he even human? The principal's tail flicked. He is something. And something more. Cursed energy, the hospital files said. Heavenly restriction. The word his doctors whispered and never explained. The world doesn't have a place for him. Yet, Aizawa let out a slow breath, shadows deepening in his eyes. I'm not sure Yue does either. Nizu set his cup aside and swiveled to another angle. Izuku alone in the hallway, moving with the same measured silence, invisible until the moment he chose not to be. Society will want to control him, or destroy him. People always fear what they can't categorize. Aizawa's mouth twisted. He's already the strongest in the room. Even All Might saw it. And so did the League of Villains, Nizu said softly, glancing at a separate screen. Shigaraki's profile, cold and unfinished, lurking in the system's red-lit files. If they notice him, he becomes the battlefield. Our future, or our end. A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the rain. Aizawa pushed off the wall, gathering his capture scarf. If he steps out of line, I'll erase him myself. Nizu's eyes glittered with something like sorrow. If you can. For a moment, the image of Izuku lingered on the screen. Head bowed, eyes half shut, lost in thought or something darker. The world outside had begun to sense what Yue already knew. Something had entered their midst that was not content to play by anyone else's rules. Below, in the dorms, Izuku sat at his desk, the city's lights flickering beyond the glass. He felt the gaze of the world turning toward him, 100 eyes, 1,000 questions, none of them willing to name what he really was. He looked at his own reflection, the faintest smirk ghosting across his lips, and waited for whatever came next. It began as a lesson. A field trip, Aizawa called it. Rescue training under simulated disaster. Yet from the moment the buses rolled up to the unforeseen simulation joint, the air vibrated with an electric, uneasy energy, as if the building itself could sense what the syllabus did not contain. The class spilled into the entrance hall, voices low, shoes squeaking on polished tile. 13's voice echoed through the space, full of hope and warnings, her smile beaming beneath the glossy dome of her helmet. Then the power flickered, a moment's hush, thick and total. And then the air tore open, space twisting, darkness blooming into a swirling gate of hands and smoke. A villain with a body like mist and a voice like broken glass stepped through. Hirojiri, Aizawa whispered, already in motion. The world exploded. Villains spilled into the USJ, thugs with knives, monsters with claws, murder in their eyes. The class scattered, training collapsing into panic. Hirojiri's portal yawned wide, and Izuku felt the air warp around him, cold, heavy, ancient. The cursed energy inside him rose, eager. Shigaraki's rasp drifted from the gloom, petulant and soft. Where is All Might? Bring me the symbol of peace. A Nomu crashed to the floor, pavement splintering beneath its weight. Even Bakugo paled. Izuku's mind clicked into focus. He saw the path of every blow, the threat coiling beneath every heartbeat. The portal began to pull at him, its boundary searing his skin. But Izuku did not resist. He slipped, body dissolving into shadow, cursed energy seething. Hirojiri blinked, momentarily thrown. Izuku passed through him like a knife through fog, his presence twisting the warp, space flickering as if refusing to contain him. In the chaos, Aizawa snapped his bindings, fighting 3, 5, 10 villains at once. But he saw Izuku moving, silent, deliberate, a shadow at the corner of his eye. The Noma lunged, barreling straight for Izuku. Izuku waited. It struck, arms like concrete pistons. He caught the blow, caught it, feet digging furrows in the tile, energy singing through every bone. The impact should have broken him, scattered his body. Instead, the cursed energy gathered, an invisible force sheathing his muscles, bending reality's rules to the shape of his will. He stared up at the Nomo, at the rows of teeth, the endless rage behind its dead eyes. He moved, no wasted motion, a step, a twist, a single, brutal strike to the base of its throat. Flesh rippled. The Noma staggered, claws flailing. Izuku's hands closed on its arm, wrenching, bones snapping with surgical precision. Another punch, focused, cold, sent the creature through a support pillar, concrete dust raining down. Shigaraki shrieked, disbelief shattering his composure. You're not supposed to." The villains hesitated. The air shifted. Aizawa stared, chest heaving, trying to fit what he'd seen into any logic he knew. Izuku stepped past the Nomu's twitching body, green eyes luminous, utterly still. The room's temperature dropped, a hush rippling out from where he stood. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, voice quiet as falling ash. Hirojiri flinched. The portal flickered. In the control room above, 13 watched, gloves trembling. He's not using a quirk, is he?" No one answered. They just watched. All Might crashed through the main doors, cape billowing, but the battle was already done. He saw the wreckage, villains slumped and moaning, a Nomu broken and unmoving, his students huddled behind the boy at the center of it all. Shigaraki's hands clenched, lips peeling back in a snarl. "You're not supposed to exist." Izuku looked at him, expressionless. "Neither are you." The villain fell back, dread crawling into his bones. Hirojiri's mist snatched him away, the league retreating in chaos. Silence settled. Sirens began to wail, far too late. Aizawa found Izuku in the rubble, untouched. "You all right, Midoriya?" Izuku met his gaze, calm and unknowable. "They'll come again. Next time, it won't be a lesson." He walked away from the carnage, classmates parting before him, fear and awe twined tight in their throats. Above, All Might stood in the broken light, a terrible realization dawning in his eyes. He was no longer the strongest in the room. And in the long echo of that first real battle, UA and the world beyond would begin to understand. Something old and ungovernable had risen among their heroes. Something not even the darkness dared claim. Rain swept UA's windows clean, but nothing could erase the stain of the USJ incident. The halls buzzed with rumor, frantic, reverent, half in awe, half in dread. For Class 1A, survival was no longer theoretical. The threat was real, and so was the presence that had saved them. Izuku Midoriya's name became a whisper, then a warning. No one spoke to him the next morning. Not really. They watched from corners and over notebooks as he entered, the hush growing heavier with every step. He moved as he always did, quiet, purposeful, his green eyes unreadable, carrying the night's storm in his shadow. No one had seen him bleed. No one had seen him afraid. It was Todoroki who broke the silence. He found Izuku after class, near the vending machines, their reflections rippling in the glass. "You could have killed that Nomo," Todoroki said, voice soft but edged with challenge. Izuku regarded him, head tilted. "Should I have?" Todoroki shook his head, uncertain. "I'm not sure. You're strong. Too strong." He watched Izuku, searching for a crack, a tell. Anything to make sense of the cold certainty he'd seen in battle. "What are you really?" Izuku's gaze held his for a moment too long. "A student. Like you." The lie hung between them, brittle and obvious. Bakugo passed in the hall, eyes narrowed. He didn't spit insults. He didn't jostle for dominance. He just watched Izuku go, jaw set, fists jammed in his pockets, haunted by the memory of being outclassed, not by luck or quirk, but by something absolute. At lunch, whispers sharpened, fragments of fear and longing. "He took down that monster alone. I heard he doesn't sleep, that he can see in the dark." Ida said he didn't even blink when the villain attacked him, just moved, like he already knew how to win. Some students shrank from him, others stared with unguarded fascination. Mineta started to say something crude, but the words died when Izuku's gaze met his, a look that made even jokes feel unsafe. Uraraka watched from across the cafeteria, her curiosity outgrowing her nerves. There was a question she wanted to ask, something about loneliness and power, but every time she approached, the distance seemed to stretch. "He's not mean," she thought. "He's just somewhere else." Aizawa called the class together after lunch. His voice was rough, eyes ringed with exhaustion. You're all thinking about what happened at USJ. Good. You should. The world's changed. You've seen what's out there and what it takes to survive. Don't rely on quirks alone. Rely on your minds. Rely on each other. He looked at Izuku for a fraction of a second longer than the rest. But if there was accusation or gratitude in his eyes, he hid it well. After class, Todoroki lingered, stubborn. You're not afraid, are you? Izuku shrugged. Of what? Todoroki hesitated. Of yourself. Of what you could do. Izuku's voice was as calm as winter. What matters is what I choose to do. The conversation ended there, but the chill lingered. That evening, as the dorms settled into uneasy calm, Class 1A watched the storm rage outside. Some wondered if the real storm hadn't already taken root inside their own walls, wrapped in the silence of a boy whose presence shook the very air. And in the hush, as rain lashed the glass and thunder crawled along the sky, a single certainty grew. Izuku Midoriya was not just a hero. He was a question no one could answer, a challenge no one could ignore. And nothing, inside UA or out, would ever be the same. The day of the UA Sports Festival dawned crisp and thunderbright, banners snapping overhead as the stadium filled with hopeful cheers and hungry speculation. All of Japan was watching. Families huddled around televisions, pro heroes filled the guest stands, and cameras tracked every tremor of youth and ambition. Yet as Class 1A gathered in the waiting tunnel, the noise outside felt a world away. Izuku Midoriya stood among them, unmoved. The others shifted from foot to foot, sweat prickling at their hairlines, eyes darting toward the field. Bakugo vibrated with pin-up challenge. Todoroki's breath misted in the cold morning air. Even the loudest seemed muted today, drawn tight around themselves, as if aware that the real contest was not against each other, but the presence at their center. When Midnight's whip cracked and the crowd roared, the festival began. First, the obstacle course. Explosions, ice, and gravity-defying leaps made for a riot of color and chaos. Izuku ran it like a ghost, no wasted movement, his shadow brushing through danger as if the traps were set for someone else. A zero-pointer bot rose before him, metal fists swinging. He slipped beneath it, pressed a palm to its knee, and the entire leg collapsed, joints warped and ruined. The bot tumbled, blocking Bakugo and several others. Izuku finished first, dusting gravel from his hands as the rest of 1A stumbled in behind him, faces drawn in awe or bitterness. In the stands, scouts whispered, "He's not using a quirk. What is he doing? Did you see how he broke that robot?" Like he already knew where it would give. The cavalry battle saw students clustering around him, desperate for points, but none dared grab his headband. The air around Izuku seemed to thicken, a warning written into every muscle. Bakugo, feral, lunged for him, only to be deflected with a single step, thrown off balance by a touch that felt almost accidental. Todoroki tried, too, ice blooming across the ground, wind biting at Izuku's heels. But he glided through it, steps never slipping, a dancer in the heart of a blizzard. Finally, the tournament bracket, the crowd's favorite. Names called, tension mounting, faces flushed with adrenaline, hearts racing. In every pairing, Izuku advanced with chilling ease. Fists met air, quirks fizzled on his skin, pain fading before it began. He outmaneuvered Todoroki, parrying fire and ice without breaking a sweat, never raising his voice or his fists more than needed. Bakugo attacked with everything, rage, explosions, memories of childhood humiliation, but was cast aside by a calm that could not be provoked. He found himself staring at the sky, chest heaving, knowing he had not simply lost. He had been dismissed. The stadium was silent as Izuku stood in the center, the final match decided before it began. Midnight raised his hand, voice uncertain, caught between admiration and apprehension. Winner, Midoriya. For a moment, the applause was thin, uncertain. Hero scouts conferred in anxious knots, eyes darting, wondering if they could trust what they'd seen. Some whispered of recruitment, others of caution, even containment. After the ceremony, when cameras tried to press close, Izuku simply turned away, untouchable, his gold medal forgotten in his fist. That night, the dorms were quiet. The students of 1A nursed bruises and questions. Ochako tried to congratulate him, but the words tangled in her throat. She watched his retreating back and realized he carried solitude the way others wore armor. Todoroki, alone on the balcony, wondered how a person could be so strong, so unreadable. Bakugo punched his pillow, the word monster echoing through his head. And across Japan, the legend grew. A boy with no quirk, no limits. A boy who had become the measure of all others, and perhaps the boundary of what it meant to be a hero. In the hush of midnight, Izuku watched the moon set, the metal cool in his palm. He felt the weight of the world's gaze, heavy and inevitable. But the silence inside him remained absolute, a storm no victory could touch. Night fell harsh and jagged on Hosu City, neon bleeding into puddles and shadows trembling along the alleys. The League's chaos had cracked the city open, but tonight something older hunted its veins, a presence cold as steel and twice as sharp. Stain stalked the darkness, a blade at the world's throat. In his wake, fear, the scent of blood, the promise of judgment. Izuku arrived in the ruins like a shadow, footsteps inaudible on shattered stone. He'd come not for glory or to prove himself, but because he'd felt a ripple in the world, a wrongness that called to the curse that lived inside him. Ida was somewhere ahead, reckless, burning with vengeance. He found Stain first. The alley was tight, cluttered with trash and the scent of old wounds. Ida lay sprawled against the bricks, fighting to rise, blood streaking his hero costume. Stain loomed above him, knife flashing in streetlight, mask slick with something that might have been rain or something darker. Izuku stepped from the shadows. Stain's eyes found him at once, pupils narrowing with animal recognition. "You're not a hero," he said, voice grating. "You're not even human. What are you?" Izuku answered only with silence. He saw the knife before it moved, felt the hunger in Stain's stance, a dance he'd known forever. Stain lunged. Ida screamed, "Midoriya, run!" But the words meant nothing. Izuku didn't flinch. The blade sliced the air where he'd been, but he was already inside Stain's guard, grip closing on the villain's wrist. For an instant, their eyes met, Stain's madness reflected in the calm of Izuku's gaze, a green so deep it seemed bottomless. The knife clattered to the ground. Stain tried to twist free, muscles coiling, but Izuku held him, grip precise, cold. With a flick of his hand, he snapped the sword in two, metal splintering like bone. "Enough," Izuku said. Stain's breath caught. The fight fled his limbs, leaving only defiance. "You're the true enemy," he rasped. "The world will fear you more than me." Izuku's face did not change. He pressed two fingers to Stain's shoulder, an ancient gesture, motionless power. The hero killer's legs buckled. He collapsed, eyes wide with something between awe and terror. Ida stared, speechless. How did you?" Izuku crouched beside him, hand gentle on his arm. "Go. Get help." The sirens came then, blue lights cutting through the smog, pro-heroes flooding the alley too late to matter. They found Stain immobilized, his sword shattered, blood pooling but no fresh wounds. Midoriya stood in the center, as unruffled as if he'd merely walked through rain. Endeavor himself paused, considering the scene, the calm, the stillness, the fear on Stain's face. "Who stopped him?" he asked. Izuku only bowed his head. Later, as reports filtered in, whispers raced across the city. The hero killer was defeated, no, undone, by a boy who didn't bleed, who didn't boast, who moved too fast for any eye to follow. Stain, as he was carried away, managed one last, hoarse pronouncement. "I see it now, the world's true enemy." His words echoed long after he was gone, chilling every hero who heard them. Izuku watched the sunrise over Hosu, Ida's safe, the city caught between relief and something colder. He had not killed. He had not lost. But the world would remember the night Stain's crusade ended, and the shadow that stood above the ruins, quiet and absolute. The news of Stain's defeat swept across Japan like wildfire. Screens flooded with shaky footage, breathless commentary, and still frames of an alleyway marked not by violence, but by the presence of a boy who stood at its center. Police tape, shattered blades. The hero killer slumped in defeat, and Izuku Midoriya's name surfacing again and again, though always spoken with caution, as if uttering it too boldly might conjure something no one could control. At UA, the aftermath was immediate. In the teacher's lounge, the HPSC, Hero Public Safety Commission, assembled, their faces grim in the blue-lit hush. Screens flashed with pie charts and satellite imagery. But it was the words on every official's lips that mattered most. Is he safe? Is he loyal? Is he even human? Aizawa stood at the edge of the meeting, silent and unblinking. All Might watched the debate with a sinking heart, hearing his student discussed like a threat, not a promise. Recovery Girl's hands trembled around her tea, haunted by the memory of her quirk slipping off Izuku's wounds, powerless. Nizu, sitting at the head of the table, let the storm rage before speaking. You want an answer, he said, his voice soft but sharp. But the question is not, what is Midoriya? It's, what will you do if he outgrows us? A hush fell. On the screen, someone had highlighted unknown variable. The HPSC chief was first to break the silence. There are protocols for this. Observation, containment, preemptive measures. If necessary. All Might's fist struck the table, quiet but final. He's not a villain. He's a boy who risked everything to save others. The chief's lips thinned. Boys become men. Men become gods. Gods have always been a threat to those who build walls. No one argued the point. In the halls, students felt the tension like static. Class 1A drifted around Izuku, drawn and wary in equal measure. Mineta whispered, "Did you hear? The government's watching him now." Kaminari tried to joke, but it died halfway out. Even Bakugo kept his distance, a hard set to his jaw. Uraraka lingered near Izuku at lunch, wanting to offer comfort, to ask if he was all right. But the words tangled and faded. He sat in the sunlight, eating in perfect silence, unreadable as always. Todoroki finally approached him in the afternoon shadows. "The teachers are talking about you. The pros, too. Some want to help. Some want to." He stopped, uncertain. Izuku met his gaze, untroubled. "They'll do what they must." A moment passed, thick with everything unsaid. "They're afraid of you," Todoroki murmured. Izuku's lips barely moved. They should be. That night, in offices across Tokyo, emails pinged, directives marked eyes only. Watch lists lengthened. Some heroes spoke in dark corners about the wisdom of eliminating a threat before it could grow beyond control. Others watched footage of the boy in the alley, of wounds closing themselves, of a face calm as rain. A line was drawn in the minds of 1,000 men and women, between the world as it was, and the world as it would be if Midoriya kept rising. And in the heart of UA, a boy with ancient power sat at his desk, eyes bright and unreadable, listening to the world's questions circle like crows outside his window. He did not answer. The world would have to decide for itself whether to trust a storm or to fear it. A sharp wind swept through the dorms, rattling windows, pulling restless shadows across UA's sleeping halls. Midnight crept in with the scent of rain and ozone, an omen for those attuned to such things. Tonight, Class 1A slept with uneasy dreams, the memory of Hosu still raw, Stain's prophecy echoing in their minds. But in the dead of night, alarms split the silence. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Doors slammed open, Aizawa's voice cutting through panic. "This is not a drill. Everyone, emergency formation. Evacuate now." Outside, chaos bloomed. The League of Villains, wreathed in shadow, crashing through the gates. Kurogiri's portals flickered open like wounds, spilling figures with eyes hungry and bright. In the confusion, Bakugo vanished, snatched from the crowd, a hand clamped over his mouth. Uraraka screamed. Kirishima lunged. But the night moved too quickly, swallowing Bakugo whole. On the rooftop above, Izuku watched the city burn at the edges, the League's malice coiling through the dark. He felt the vibration in the air, the pulse of power and desperation. The curse inside him surged, drawn to violence like a moth to flame. A voice slithered from the shadows. Shigaraki, pale and twitching, stepped from a portal, flanked by Dabi and Toga, faces twisted with hope and threat. "We want you, Midoriya," Shigaraki hissed. "Not Bakugo. You. Come with us, or he dies." Izuku regarded them, utterly calm. "Let him go. I'll come." Surprise flickered in Shigaraki's eyes, but greed quickly drowned it. "Smart. Dabi, bring him." A portal opened beneath Izuku's feet, cold and slick as oil. He didn't resist. The world twisted. The next breath, he stood in a warehouse choked with dust and shadows. Bakugo, bound and gagged, glared murder from the floor. The League circled, Dabi's flames dancing, Toga licking blood from a blade, twice muttering to himself. Shigaraki approached, trembling with excitement. "We could use you, you know. The world fears you. Heroes want to cage you. But with us, you could be free. You could be king. Izuku's eyes glinted, unreadable. You don't understand what I am. Shigaraki laughed, a broken sound. We understand enough. We know power. Show us. A moment passed. A heartbeat, a ripple in the dust. Then Izuku moved. Not rage. Not spectacle. Just inevitability. He dissolved his bonds, energy crackling beneath his skin. In a blur, he swept the room. Dabi's flames snuffed out with a twist of the wrist. Toga disarmed and left whimpering, twice pinned to the floor. Even Shigaraki's hand, reaching for his face, never touched him. Izuku's fingers grazed Shigaraki's wrist, and the villain collapsed, paralyzed by a pressure that felt like drowning. Bakugo spat out his gag, eyes wide. You could have killed them. Why didn't you? Izuku's voice was soft, flat. They're not ready for what I am. He left them broken but alive. A single message scorched into the wall with a fingertip. You're not ready. Outside, the rain started, washing blood and fear from the broken pavement. Back at UA, students counted heads, hearts pounding until Bakugo and Midoriya reappeared in the lobby. Unharmed, silent, changed. Aizawa looked at Izuku, reading the truth in his stillness. Did you go willingly? He asked. Izuku nodded. They needed to know. The night ended, but the storm lingered. In the League's ruined lair, Shigaraki nursed his wounds, eyes wild with terror and hunger. He's not a hero. He's not a villain. And Dabi, staring at his scorched arm, finished the thought for him. He's something else. That night, word spread. UA's storm had faced the darkness and left it wanting. The legend grew, and for the powerful, fear grew with it. Morning broke gray and restless over Japan, but the city buzzed with a new electricity. News outlets replayed the League's defeat again and again. Grainy footage of a shattered warehouse, anonymous sources whispering about a boy who dismantled villains with inhuman calm. Social feeds and hero forums lit up with questions, accusations, and prayers. UA student crushes League of Villains. Who is Midoriya? Izuku, hero or threat? Witnesses say he walked through fire like it was air. At UA, a strange hush held the halls. Some students avoided Izuku entirely, whispers hissing in their wake. Others, especially the quirkless and those who'd always felt less, found themselves drawn to the myth taking root at their school. Mineta stared openly. Ciro muttered, "The guy fought the League alone." Kirishima grinned, all wrestling with wariness. "He makes us all want to be better, you know?" Uraraka, watching Izuku eat in silence, wondered if hope and fear could coexist in the same heart. Even Bakugo, returned from the night's ordeal, seemed quieter, haunted by memories he wouldn't share. He studied Izuku from across the classroom, gaze sharp and searching, the old rivalry eclipsed by something closer to dread. Teachers walked the halls in knots, their voices hushed. Aizawa summoned Midoriya after class, not to scold or praise, but to observe, searching his student's face for cracks, for anything that might reveal the secret inside. "Why did you let them live?" he finally asked, eyes narrowed. Izuku met his gaze, unreadable. "Because fear lasts longer than scars." Aizawa swallowed, accepting the truth and its danger. But the world outside UA was changing too. For the first time, crowds gathered at the school gates, not to protest, but to cheer. Quirkless children clung to the fence, their eyes bright with impossible hope. Reporters begged for interviews. Some citizens sent gifts, letters, even prayer beads. Support swelled among those who'd always felt powerless. "He's like us," one mother told a news crew. "He's proof you don't need a quirk to be strong." But for the powerful, for the heroes who watched the news with clenched fists and the officials who tracked Izuku's every move, fear eclipsed admiration. Quiet meetings turned urgent. The HPSC drafted new memos, increased surveillance, extreme caution, prepare for escalation. Hero agencies debated recruiting him or simply containing him. One foreign hero team requested information sharing. Others whispered of plans far less friendly. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in bruised blue and violet, Izuku stood alone on the rooftop, eyes on the city. The air was sharp with rain and change. He felt the weight of the world's gaze, heavy as thunder, uncertain as dawn. Below, the powerless reached for him. Above, the powerful watched, afraid, calculating, waiting for a single misstep. Izuku closed his eyes, letting the hush settle around him. He belonged to neither side. He was simply himself, a force no longer hidden, a rumor become reality. And as the first drops of rain fell, he knew the world had seen his shadow. Now it would have to decide what it truly feared, and what it truly hoped for. The rain did not let up for 3 days. Lightning webbed the sky over Mizutofu, thunder pressing against the city's bones. At UA, every classroom vibrated with questions no one dared ask aloud. Teachers whispered, students watched each other from the corners of their eyes, and news helicopters circled above, lenses hungry for a glimpse of the heavenly hero. But in the silence of the storm, another gaze found Izuku, a presence deeper than rumor, colder than rain. He felt it first on the rooftop, the wind tangling his hair as he looked out across the city's silvered skyline. The cursed energy within him stirred, restless, attuned to some ancient call. He was not alone, not truly. He had never been. A shadow stretched behind him, longer than it should be, slipping along the wet stone as if the world itself bent to make room. He closed his eyes, breathing in the ozone, and let the silence wrap him. Far below, UA buzzed with nervous life. Aizawa running drills, recovery girl tending to scrapes, classmates huddled in cliques, each of them tracing circles around the void that Izuku carved in every room. The school's leaders gathered behind closed doors, faces pale and flickering light. Nizu's voice was quiet, final. All for one will not ignore this. We should prepare. Somewhere across the city, in a bunker veiled by shattered glass and steel, Shigaraki listened to the rain drum against the roof, fingernails digging into his palms. He's the future, he muttered, lips curling around the word as if it were a curse. Or our end. All for one watched the news from a throne of wires and life support, eyes like blackened wounds. His voice cut through the league's whispers. Bring him to me, alive and whole. He is no ordinary anomaly. He is an open wound in this world, and I will know what he truly is. Shigaraki shivered, nodding. Yes, sensei. That night, Izuku stood alone at the edge of UA's tallest roof, rain pounding his shoulders. The city sprawled below, infinite and indifferent. A flash of lightning split the sky. In its wake, the world stilled, and a new weight pressed in from the edges of reality, a ripple that brushed his skin and curled in his blood. He felt the gaze from somewhere other, somewhere old, a call not of this world but of the one beneath or beyond, a promise and a threat. Izuku opened his eyes, lips parting to taste the air. A memory not his own flickered behind his gaze, a forest of silver roots, a sky with no sun, voices chanting in a language lost before birth. So the real hunt begins. He whispered it to the rain, and the darkness seemed to answer, a hush settling like a hand on his shoulder. Below, UA's windows glowed in rows of trembling light, each one a promise he could not keep. Above, the storm circled, hungry for answers. Somewhere far away, All for One moved his pieces, and the world itself shifted. And high above the city, as the thunder rolled and the other world pressed close, Izuku Midoriya stood at the edge of everything. Hunter and hunted, storm and silence, poised on the knife edge of war. And that's a wrap on today's story. What if Deku was Toji Fushigiro's reincarnation? I hope you enjoyed listening it as much as I loved putting it together. If you did, don't forget to smash that like button, drop a comment sharing your thoughts or your own what if ideas, and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support really helps these stories reach even more MHA fans. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Plus Ultra.